Welcome to an RPG in a Box Basics video tutorial. In this video, we're going to talk about skills. I'm going to show you how to make a skill, how to give a skill, and also how to use the skills. So, I've set up a couple of things on the map beforehand. I've set up an entity here that you start a tactical turn-based battle with, and a sign where you can add a party member, so we can test some of the things that skills can do. Okay. Before that though, we need to make a skill that we can use. So I'll quickly go over the skills editor, what the options are, and how to make a skill. So first of all, to find the skills editor, it's inside the stats editor. So it's part of the stats editor. So find that along the options along the top, click the stats tab, and then you're going to scroll down to where it says skills. Okay. And we currently don't have any skills. So let's add a skill. So when you add a skill, it will obviously create one, and it will give you a skill ID. In this case, skill_0001. You cannot change these. These are automatically created each time you create a skill. These are unique, and this is what your scripts are going to be referring to. So you'll see that in a moment when we actually use these skills. You'll see that we'll use this name here. Okay. However, we can actually give our skill a name, as it will be displayed visibly in game. So let's say we make a healing skill that heals ourselves for the moment. So we'll call this healing, let's say. Okay. If you have any images, you can set an icon for your skill. So you would basically either import an image, and now images for the icon needs to be either 16 by 16 pixels or 32 by 32 pixels, okay? If you don't want to import your own, and one way that you can create an icon for your skill is to go to the items editor, quickly make a dummy item, like we've just done here by just clicking the add button. This will then give you access to the image editor, so we can create a new image that's either 16 by 16 or 32 by 32. So let's say I do 32 by 32. In fact, actually, let's do 16 by 16. It's a bit quicker. And I'll call this healing. And then we can create an image, something like that, let's say. Okay. Obviously, it's not centered, but you get the idea. Then you click OK. That will then give you your image, and then we don't need the item anymore. We can delete the item. Then we can go save that, go back to our stats editor, go to our skill, and we can now select the healing image. So that's another way of using the inbuilt image editor. It would be nice if anything that had image assigning to it would also have the ability to open up the editor. So far it's only on items, but nonetheless, we've created a image for our healing skill. You could put in a description, so this would be where you describe what the skill does for when you mouse over the skill. So this will heal the player, let's say. You can obviously put whatever you want in there. Then you've got your category. Now, as far as I'm aware, this is just for your benefit. It doesn't have any impact, I don't think, on the skill itself. So I think this is just for the editor, just so you know what this skill is supposed to be. Is it magic? Is it combat? Is it a social skill? Is it a physical skill? Let's say, for example, it's a magic skill. Now, as I say, this, as far as I'm aware, doesn't actually change anything. None of the options change, and it doesn't have any impact in game. This is just for you to sort of know what is the category. There might be something added later where you can put different skills into different categories, but for the moment, it's literally just for you to just pick what type of skill it is. So in this case, it's a magic skill, okay? Now, at the moment, the only type of skill you can make is an active one. You can't make passive ones, but bearing in mind we can script skills, so you know, you might be able to script a passive skill even if you can't set it to passive, okay? But nonetheless, active is obviously what it's going to have to be. Now, what you can toggle is usable in combat. Now, if this is unchecked, like it is at the moment, then you won't be able to use this skill in menu-driven or tactical turn-based battles. But if you do want it to be usable in combat, then obviously make sure that's ticked, and then the skill will be available in battles, okay? Now, the next option is the stat required. So if you want to, you can set that using this skill costs something. So it might cost you health, it might cost you mana, or it might cost you money in order to use the skill. So if you don't have enough of it, then you can't use the skill. So if you set a stat, then you set the cost, okay? We'll say none for now. Obviously, you can customize the stat, I think. Let's just check that. If we create a custom stat, does that appear? Let's do fear. And let's see if we save that and drop the cost thing down. Yes, you get fear. So if you want a custom stat, just make one, save it, and then it will appear in this list. So you don't just have to use the free that are inbuilt. You can, of course, add your own stat and have it cost that as well. So obviously if we, in this case, don't have 5 fear, or we don't have 5 health, or we don't have 5 currency, then you wouldn't be able to cast the skill or whatever. And it will deduct that amount from currency or health or whatever when you use it, okay? So in this case, we'll get rid of our custom stat. We don't need that. And we'll set this back to none. Then you've got the target. Target's pretty self-explanatory. You specify who does this skill target. In this case, we're making a skill that heals the player. So we're just going to leave this as self. We will go through all of these in a moment. I'll show you each of these in effect so you can see how they work. But for now, we'll just stick with the first one. We're going to make a healing skill that targets self, the player, and will heal the player. Next, we have the cooldown options. These are for how long between casting a skill or spell, whatever you want to call them, can you then do another one, okay? So if your game is real time, or if you're casting it on the real time map, then this is how many seconds between being able to use the skill before you can use it again. So if you said 10 seconds, then you're going to have to wait 10 seconds after using it the first time before it's available to use again, okay? And then the other two are for turn-based. So if you're doing a menu-based battle or a turn-based battle, then this is how many turns before you can use it again. So not seconds, how many turns, as it's sort of listed here. So you could say 5 turns, and then you've got to wait 5 turns before you can use the skill again, okay? And then roguelike is if you're playing the roguelike game, then how many actions before you can use it again. So, how many steps forward, how many attacks. Everything in roguelike is done as actions. So how many actions before you can then use the skill again. So in this case, 5, okay? We're not going to bother with the roguelike in this example. We're going to use turn-based, okay? Because I've got a turn-based battle which we can start in a moment and we can test our skill with, okay? So we'll set it to 2 turns. And then the next option is the most important. What does your skill do? It's not doing anything at the moment. So the effects is then what does the skill actually do? So in this case, we want to click the green plus add effect button. That will bring up this list here. And we can do a whole manner of things here. We can heal, we can damage, we can temporarily buff a stat, we can temporarily debuff a stat, we can apply a status effect, which we'll cover in another video when we cover status effects. We can remove a status effect. We can clear status effects. That basically means it just gets rid of everything, whereas remove is a specific one. Whereas clear would be, reset your character basically from all status effects. Summon a character, which will add a character onto the map, whether it be a battle map or a overworld map, or we can play a sound, okay? So in this case, what we want to do is we want to heal the player. So let's click healing, restoration, okay? And then you specify the effect. So do we want it to be a fixed amount or a percentage? So if we set a fixed amount, we could say the player always gets 5 HP, okay? If you set it to a percentage, then it will always be 25% applied. So 25% would be the healing amount, okay? It's not how much health you need to have before you heal, it's how much health is applied. Okay, so 25%. for now, I think the easiest one to use is fixed because you know how much you're going to get. So we're going to get 5 HP every time we heal, okay? So what we can do now is we can save this skill, okay? Now, it's important to note we need to do 2 other things before you can actually use a skill. First of all, we need an area on the interface where we can see what skills we have. By default, we don't have an area on the interface where skills can go because skills do not go into the inventory and they do not go into the equipment menu. They go into their own user interface. And by default, that interface, just like tools, is not enabled. So what we then need to do is we need to go to game configuration. You need to go to the user interface section and you need to turn on the skill bar. Now, I should also mention at this point that you can obviously make your own with the widget editor. If you're going to make your own, you don't need to have this on. This only needs to be on if you're just going to use the inbuilt skill bar. Obviously, you can make your own. You can go to the UI editor, go to widgets, create a new widget, which we'll just call skills for the moment, and then you can drag your skill slots into here and make your own skill interface. If you're going to do that, then you'll open this widget in a script using the show widget command, and you'll have this option off, okay? So it then uses your custom widget. But we'll use the inbuilt one, so we'll turn this on, and we'll delete our skills widget. Let's go into game and see how this works. So here we are in game. We've got our skill bar on the side here. That's what this is. This is the skill bar. Now, when you make a skill, obviously you've got to give the player the skill, okay? You can't just make it. It's got to be given to them, just like an item in the item editor. They don't by default have it unless you script them to have it, for example, in the startup script. So for now, what we'll do is we'll just bring down the console and I'll type give skill, which is the command you would use in a script to give the skill when you want to give it. And then in the brackets and inside the speech marks, you type that ID that I pointed out at the very beginning when we made this skill. Every skill has a unique ID, in this case, skill 0001. As soon as we press enter, you should see this box here at the very top of our skill slot will gain our skill. And there we go. There's our little green cross. We hover over it. We get the name of it, healing, and we get the description. This will heal the player. Let's get rid of the console. And let's go into battle with this slime. So here we are in turn-based battle. So what we'll do is we'll let the slimes damage us so that we can use our healing skill. So I'll just end my turn, take a few hits. There we go, I've just been hit for 1. Hit again for 2. 3. 4, 5, 6. So if I now move away and then I use my skill, you should see that I should heal for 5 and then this will have a cooldown. So you didn't see it because the moment I clicked it, the camera jumped away from me to the enemy, so you didn't actually see the numbers show on the screen, but you would have seen. I'll try and do it again. So before we get to that though, you notice how when I clicked it, this is grayed out and it's now got a 1 in the corner, telling me I've got 1 more turn to go before I can use it. So I can't actually click this at the moment, it's grayed out. So if I move over here, get away from the slimes, end my turn. Now this comes back, so I can click it, you'll see that I get 1. Well, I might still heal for 5, but in essence, it's only going to apply 1. Okay, so it just applies 1. So even though we set it to heal for 5, it will obviously only heal you up to the max. So in this case, it only applied 1 health. And then as again, you can see it's now waiting for 2 turns before I can use it again. So that's a simple healing skill. Yeah, it does what it says. It heals you for the amount that you specify whenever you take damage. So let's take a look at changing this spell or skill, whatever you want to call it, so that it does more than the player. So what we could do is we could change this so that instead of healing self, we could set it to heal party. Now you'll see there's 2 options here. We've got party and party member. What are the differences between the two? Party is everyone. This will heal everyone. So if we set that to party and we set this to a fixed amount of 5, then every party member who's got damage will be healed for 5. Okay, so let's test this. Let's go into game and let's recruit a party member. So we'll click on this sign. Stumpy's looking to join a party, so join, and we've now got Stumpy in our party. So now let's go, first of all, give the skill. We need the skill. Obviously, we could have made a sign that gives us the skill as well. Perhaps I should have done that, but we'll do it this way for now. And then we start the battle. So now Stumpy's there somewhere. If I end my turn, there's Stumpy. Let's move Stumpy a bit closer. What we'll do is we'll let both characters take some damage. So if I go and stand near Stumpy, Stumpy near me. So I've just taken some damage. We'll let the slime damage Stumpy as well. There you go, Stumpy's just taken some damage. I've just taken some damage. Now, actually, let's use the skill just in case one of us dies. We probably won't, but just to be safe. So I can now use this skill. Now, this skill is set to not heal. I should have changed the description. It's set to heal the party now. So if I click this, both of us will heal. Yeah, you'll see I get healed for 4, Stumpy gets healed for 2, and he's now at full health, as am I. Okay, and then we've got a cooldown. Okay, now notice something that's also worth pointing out. Okay, if I end my turn, I will go to Stumpy, and I will take control of Stumpy. Notice how Stumpy does not have the skill. Okay, it's important to note that the entity you give the skills to, in this case I gave them to the player, they're the ones who have the skill. So if you want party members to have the skill, you might be able to specify in give skill the entity that you give the skill to. We'll check that in a moment. But it's just important to know that by default, party members don't have the skills. It's the player that has the skills. So let's go back for a moment to the editor. That's how party works. So you can see that will just heal the party across the board. So any party members that are hurt, this skill will heal them all, okay, for the amount that you've specified. Now, if I just quickly go to the script editor and go to the visual script editor, just want to check something for a minute. Give skill. Yes, so you specify the character. So what you would do if you wanted other party members to have this is you would give the skill and then you'd put into here, you would put party.member, and in my case, the ID I gave Stumpy was Stumpy1, okay? And then that means Stumpy would have the skill, okay? So if we wanted to do that, let's actually do that. Let's close that. Let's go to my sign in the map editor. And edit the quick script I placed on it. So I'm adding party member. That's the model, STMP Stumpy. And then that's the ID that I'm giving Stumpy when he joins. So we can also give skill 0001 and then party.member Stumpy1. So as he joins our party, he's also got that skill. Let's give that a test, just make sure that works. I'm sure it will, but it's just good to verify. So if we click the sign, have Stumpy join our party. I don't have the skill, but we'll leave Stumpy having the skill. So if we now fight the slime, we don't have the slime, but if I end my turn and go to Stumpy, Stumpy has the skill. Okay? So that's how to give skills. It's important to know, unless you specify that all party members are given the skill, the player will have the skill. Okay, so you have to give the skill to each and every party member if you want them to have the skill as well. Obviously, you'd probably have different party members with different skills, but it's just important to know that, okay? The party members and the player have their own skill sets, right? And unless you specify otherwise, they're individual, they're unique. So that's party, that targets everyone. If we select party member, however, this will heal the selected part, or not selected, this will heal the targeted party member, is more accurately what it is. So if we do that and we say heal for 5, let me show you what this does. We'll save this and we will change our script, because I don't want Stumpy to have this skill. We'll change the script. So instead of giving it to Stumpy, we'll actually just give it to us. So we'll leave it as that, like we were typing it in the console. So as Stumpy joins our party, we also gain that skill. So if we click on the, we don't have the skill currently. If we click on the sign, let's have Stumpy join our party. We gain the skill. Stumpy's joined our party as well. And if we read the description, this will heal the targeted party member. Okay, so how does this work? So if we go into battle, so here we are with Stumpy. Let's move away from the slimes, but let's move Stumpy into the slimes because he doesn't have the skill. So in this case, the player is going to be the one that's healing the party members. Okay, so let's end our turn. Stumpy is going to be attacked. I'll wait for him to take damage. Okay, he's just taken 2 damage. So now, as soon as I click this, I get this crosshair icon on the cursor. Okay, this crosshair cursor. And I can use this to aim at a party member. Notice how it doesn't work if I click on a slime, because the slime's not a party member. Now, will it work on me? Yes, it will work. It will accept you. So you can heal yourself as well. Pointless, because I'm at full health. But I can aim at Stumpy, and I can click on Stumpy, and I now heal him. And then I have the cooldown. So that's how targeted skills work. You click it, you click the skill, your cursor will change into a target, and then you click on the entity that you want to target. In this case, which party member, and then it will do whatever to that party member, in this case, heal, okay? Because remember, this is the effects that will happen when you click on the party member, okay? So next after that, we then have the enemy settings. So enemy is a specific one, just like party member. So you target an enemy with that cursor, that crosshair. And then all enemies is like the party one, where it will just do all enemies. So for example, if we did all enemies and we changed healing to damage, and let's say 5, let's leave it at 5, 10 might be a bit too much. This will damage all enemies. We'll call this damage. Obviously healing doesn't make sense, but I'm not going to make another icon. Save it and play. Grab our skill. So now we've got damage. This will damage all enemies. Let's go into battle. We've got the 2 slimes in front of us, which is perfect. I couldn't have set that up better, because we want to click this and it should automatically damage both of these slimes for 5. Yeah, they're almost dead. If I'd given it 6 or something like that, maybe 7, that would have been it. We'd have won the battle straight away, right? But now we've got a 2-turn cooldown before we can use it again, okay? Now, another thing that's worth mentioning about skills is that skills will take up your ability to do things in your turn. So, you see these white squares? These are where I can move to. So if I move to here, that's like a maximum move. I can't... well, technically I can move again. I can move anywhere here. But this is the maximum that I can move. And then I can't attack because there's no enemies in range. If I use this skill, that will now count as my turn and it will end because I've done the maximum move and I can't attack. So as soon as I click this, my turn ends and now I'm Stumpy, right? That's important to know because when you use a skill, it means you can't attack. And if you've already moved your maximum amount before you click a skill, your turn will automatically end as well. So it's just, these things are important to know with how they work as well, especially if your skill has a script assigned to it. It is possible that that script will not trigger until your next turn because of the fact that your turn ends the moment you use the skill. If the script is then supposed to do something, that might not trigger until your next turn because you did it right at the very end of the things you could do in your turn. So if your skill is something that is scripted, which we'll get to in a moment, you might want to do those first before you move, just so you make sure that when you use the skill, it does all of the script first in your turn. Those are just things to be wary of. This issue of it happening at the end of your turn doesn't affect any of the inbuilt things like damage and heal because they happen instantly. But if you've scripted a skill to do something, like something takes a bit of time, like it spawns an enemy after a few seconds or something like that, then if you click that at the end of your turn, then those things are not going to happen until the beginning of your next turn because it immediately ends your turn because it thinks you've used the skill because you've clicked on it and that was the last thing you could do in your turn, so it then just ends your turn. But if that script is supposed to be doing things after a wait or something like that, then you might find an instance where your turn is ending and it hasn't done those things. And then when it's your turn again, when it's the character that you were when you clicked the skill again, that's when it then does those things. Or you have to click it again and it will do those things. So you just have to be very careful with scripted skills because they don't necessarily take into account what you can currently do in your turn when you script those things. So you have to be aware of that when you're playing the game. Okay, so I mentioned that right on the off. And then the last one, we'll just quickly set it, is enemy, and then this will damage a targeted enemy. So this is very much like it was when we focused our healing on a particular party member. This is a particular enemy. So we'll change this to enemy, we'll change the description, we'll damage them for 5, click save, play. So if we move closer so we can see this slime, here we have our skill. This will damage a targeted enemy. So if I click this, now we get our cursor. Now if I click on this slime, this is the slime it's going to damage. And we didn't see it because, again, this is the thing that I sort of was talking about just a minute ago. Because that was the last thing I could do in my turn, it immediately ended my turn the moment I clicked on the slime, and it's jumped me over to Stumpy. Whereas if I hadn't moved and I'd done the skill first, I could then move afterwards, so you'd have actually seen the damage effect. But if I move Stumpy a bit closer, maybe end my turn, you can see that slime has been damaged. Okay. In fact, if I move closer in my turn to this slime, I can then click here, damage this slime, and then I can still move. Okay, that's what I meant by the order upon which you do things. It's important to note that with skills, because if this was a scripted skill, it might automatically end your turn because I'd already moved as well. So make sure you do the skills first before you move, especially if it's a scripted skill. So then that guarantees it does all of the script before it then ends your turn, because you then have to move first anyway. Okay, does that make sense? So with that said, let's get on to custom skills. Like, we don't want to do any of the inbuilt stuff. We don't want to do any of these. What if you want to script a skill? Let's create a custom skill, which I came up with for this video, where what we're going to do is we're going to create the ability to turn enemies into stone. And what that's going to do is going to do two things. It's going to change their appearance so they look like they've been turned into stone, so they don't move, they're frozen. But also, they literally cannot move. So we can still take turns, we can move around the board, but they can't while they're frozen. Okay? And it's going to be an effect that lasts for, let's say, 2 turns. So for 2 turns, the enemies won't be able to move, the ones that have it anyway, the ones that have been turned into stone. And but while we can still move around. And then 2 turns later, they will change back to normal and they'll be able to move again. So we're going to make a skill that does that. Now, in order to do that, we're going to delete the inbuilt effect and we're going to add a script. So we're going to click the Add Script button. Now we don't yet have a script, so this is a bit premature, but this is what we're going to do. We're going to click Test Skill, and we'll click OK. And this is actually going to be the script. This is what I'm going to call it. We'll use this script to create our effect. So what we want to do is we want to go to the script editor and open up our test skill, and we need to think about how we're going to do this effect. Now, currently, I don't know if this will be fixed at a later date. It's up to Justin whether he decides it needs to be fixed or not. But currently, if you change the model of an enemy in a turn-based battle during battle, it will stop that enemy being targetable. So you won't be able to attack it. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to add a frame onto our enemy. Okay, so we're using the purple slime in our battle. So what I'm going to do is add a frame at the very end. So we'll jump to the last frame and we'll duplicate. That's delete. We'll duplicate and we'll make a 32 frame. Okay, and what we'll do is we'll change the color. So we'll click the Replace Color tool, select like a stone gray, click on the purple. Let's make it a bit darker. There's our stone slime, okay? And we'll save that. We'll then make an animation, so we'll click Add, and we'll call this Frozen. And this is going to be 32 to 32 on a loop. Okay, so we've got a frozen animation, which is literally just this one frame over and over and over again. Hence, frozen. Okay, the animation it's literally frozen. And we'll save the model one more time. So now we need to think about our script. So when we click our skill, what do we want it to do? Well, what we want it to do first of all is allow us to select which entity gets frozen. So for this, what we want to do is we want to use a script function called request entity. If you want to learn a bit more about request entity, you can look it up. I've already done it, as you can see in the documentation, but you can click the documentation and you can type request and click entity, and this will bring up the page for it, and this will tell you how to use it. We're actually going to use this page because I need to copy this bit of code here because we're going to use it. Copy to clipboard. What this basically does is it prompts the player for an entity using the cursor. So it's very much the same thing that this option does when we select enemy or party member, where it brings up that cursor where you click on something. That's what request entity is going to do. It's going to do that same functionality, but in our custom script. So what we need to do is, first of all, we need to make a function inside this script for what type of entity are we going to be allowed to click on. It makes sense that we should only really be able to freeze our enemies. We don't want to freeze ourselves. We don't want to freeze our party members. So we should be able to freeze our enemies. So we want to validate target. Let's call the function validate target, something like that. And then begin and end. So we've got a begin and an end. So this is going to be our function within here. So, sorry, this needs to be val target, and then it needs to have open and close brackets because it's a function. And we also need to pass in a selected variable. So this is the thing we click on, okay, or have our mouse cursor over. So what we want to do is we want to store what our mouse cursor is over into a local variable. But what we actually want to do is we want to have target underscore tags equals $selected.tags. So that will check the tags that are on the thing that our mouse cursor is over. Okay. Now what we need to do as well, aside from this, is we need to check what the tags are on the slime and things like that, so that we make sure that if we use this tag approach, which we're going for, that it will only work on slime. So we'll get to that in a second. But the next thing we need to do is type return $target tags contains, and then in this case, enemy. So what this function is going to do is it's going to check what our mouse cursor is over. That's what this selected is going to contain. It's going to contain everything that we mouse cursor over. And then everything that we mouse cursor over, it's going to store the tags of that thing inside this variable. And then it's only going to allow, that's what this return bit does, it's only going to allow that target, if you will, if its tags which we've grabbed contains that specific tag enemy. Okay, so this will mean that we can only the only valid target we can click on is something with the tag enemy. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to store a local variable. Let's call it target1. It's then going to equal request entity, and then inside the brackets, inside the speech marks, we need to type the name of our validation function. So in this case, val target. So that's going to then run that whole process of asking us to click an entity, and it's only going to allow one that has the tag enemy. And then when we have clicked one of those, it's going to store that entity inside this variable. So we can now use this variable to do things to. So what we can then do is we can then say we can say override animation $target1, and then we want to change their idle animation to frozen. So they change to that stone frame, and they stay frozen with no animation, because the frozen animation only has one frame on a loop. So that will give the illusion of not only looking like stone, but acting like they're frozen. But we also need to stop their ability to move. So what we'll also then do is type $target1.stat, and we're going to change their move range stat, which is how many, in a turn-based battle, it's how many tiles they can move on a turn. So by default, I think the slimes are set to 1. We're going to set that to 0. So now they just can't move. Okay, so that's stopped their ability while they're on that frame to not move. Okay, now we need to, this isn't permanent, so we then need to enable some things that are going to allow us to manage the period of time upon which this skill lasts for. So we're going to type global.property, and we're going to store a couple of global properties. So we'll have frozen equals true. So we'll store the fact that something's been frozen, and we should store that on the property of the target. What we also need to do thinking about it is because this target that we're targeting needs to be referenced outside this script as well. So what we should do is while we've got this enemy targeted, we should give it an ID. So I'm going to assign entity ID, so I can then reference this entity outside of this script. So the entity which we want to give an ID to is target1, and we'll give it the ID of target1. So we can then forever reference it outside of this script until we're done with it. So what we'll do is we'll actually put this property onto entity target1. And then what we'll do is we'll have a global property. There's no point putting this on the entity. We'll create a global property called frozen timer equals 0 to start with. Okay. And we will click apply and save. So I believe that's the script as I want it for the actual skill. So once you've saved that, go to your skill editor and make sure that is on our script, on our skill, sorry. So I'm going to change the name of this to calcify. It's going to be the name of my skill. Obviously, we don't have a proper icon for it, so we'll leave that as is. This will turn the targeted enemy into stone for 2 turns, let's say, something like that. And then we'll have it as magic, usable in combat, and we'll leave it as not requiring a stat. But obviously, realistically, you'd probably assign mana to it. But we're going to leave the target as self because our script is going to handle the targeting. So we don't want to specify that from here. When you do a script, you want to just leave it as self, but then the script will have you targeting something specific. So leave this as self. And then obviously this is a skill that's going to take 2 turns, so leave that as 2 turns. And then we don't want to damage the enemy, so remove that effect. We want to add a script, so this one here, and we want test skill. So there's our script. Click save. So now we need to think about how does this skill stop? What stops it? So it's 2 turns. So what we need to do now is we need to go to the combat editor, and we need to make a pre-round script. So at the beginning of every round, it does something. So what we're going to do is go to the script editor one more time, create a new script, and we'll call this let's call it freeze check. And let me just think for a minute how we want to do this. So if entity target1 not equal to null, then that means we've used our skill, because entity target1 will only exist if we've frozen something, okay? So this can be a check for every time we start a round, is there something that's currently frozen? If entity target1 is not null. We could also check if entity target1, let's do a final check anyway, even though it's a bit redundant, but just because we used it. If target1.property frozen equals true, then this is just an extra step. So is it null? If it's not null, then also just check if it's frozen, which it should be, because you can't have one without it being frozen. So then what we want to do, if that's the case, we want to increase that global property. So in global property, frozen timer plus equals 1. So we're going to add 1 to that. So this is our next turn, as it were, or next round, as it actually is. And then we're going to check if global.property frozen timer is equal to 2, then this now means it's the beginning of the second round, so we want to undo what we've done. So what we want to do now is entity target1 dot stat move range goes back to 1. Now, another thing that you could do, instead of actually specifying the value, in our skill script, the one that sets it to 0, before you set it to 0, you could store the actual stat that it's currently set to before you change it. So then here you could put it back to what you stored it as. So that way you wouldn't need to know what it was and manually type it back. For now, we'll manually type it back just so it's quicker and easier. And then we want to override animation for entity target1, and we want to override their idle animation back to the idle animation. So they'll now start idling again, and they'll move because of being able to move on their next turn. And then the last thing we want, a few more things we need to do. We need to clear out their property. So entity target1 dot property frozen. We could either make it false, or we could just nullify it so it doesn't exist anymore. We'll give that a go, see if that'll work. And then the last thing we need to do is entity, let's see if we can do it this way. Entity target1 dot ID equals null. So this is important, because what we need to do once we're finished with the entity, and I misspelled that, is we need to remove its ID. Why? So that when we click that same entity again, if, let's say, for example, we froze it and we didn't kill it within 2 turns, so it's, comes back to moving again, and we want to freeze it again, if this entity already has an ID, then our skill script is going to error saying you can't give it an ID because it's already got one. So you want to make sure that when our skill is done with, when the timer for it runs out, it also removes the ID, so it's then capable of being given the ID again. Okay, so that's what this is going to do. It's going to remove the ID from it. Okay, but I only do that at the end because obviously we want to use the ID to do all of this stuff. So let's just check we've done everything. We should also reset the timer. So global.property. I mean, we don't really need to do the timer here because it's going to happen on the skill anyway, but let's just do it as we're here. So we'll set the frozen timer back to 0. Okay, apply and save. So this is our freeze check. And as I say, that goes into the combat section. That goes in the pre-round script section. Okay, so let's go into game and see how this works. So here we are in game. I did forget to do the tags, so we'll check that afterwards, but it should work because I think slimes already have that tag on them. So let's quickly go give the skill, and we'll have Stumpy join the party as well. But there's our calcify skill. This will turn the targeted enemy into stone for 2 turns. Let's go and start a tactical turn-based battle. So we have 2 slimes. We also have Stumpy over here. So if I click my calcify skill, you see I get my cursor. This is the request entity. The timer is now initiated, so we need a cooldown timer of 2 turns. If I hover my cursor, hover the cursor over the slimes, you'll notice how currently the target cursor is white, but if I hover over the slime, it goes green with a sort of purple outline to it. It's difficult to see because the slime is purple, but you can just see it there if I hover it on the corner over the grass. If I hover over Stumpy, it doesn't do that. And if I click, it's not doing anything because Stumpy doesn't have the tag enemy. So let's turn this slime into stone. So it's stopped moving and it's turned grey. So it stopped moving because the idle animation is now changed to frozen, the frozen animation. And we've also set his move area to none. So if I now move my character over here, end my turn, let's move Stumpy out of the way. If we end Stumpy's turn, this slime should still move, but this one will not move. Okay, so now it becomes my turn again. We've got a timer of 1. So I will continue to run away. Stumpy will continue to come this way. And if I end my party member's turn, the slime here will still move. This one will still be stuck for 1 more turn. Okay, but now the slime is back because at the pre-round for round 2, it saw that the timer was at 2. So it's done. It's put everything back. So now if I quickly move my player back this way so I can aim at the slime, end my turn, move Stumpy slightly out of the way. Now they'll both move. Both slimes should now move again, so this one should be able to move. Okay, but I can use my skill again, target the same one, it does an error, and it freezes again for 2 more turns. And then it's back again, and then it can move again. Okay, so that's an example of some of the things you can do, or one of the things, but you can, obviously anything you do in script should work as a skill. So a couple of things to bear in mind with skills. First of all, this option here, usable in combat. After doing a little bit of investigation, I misspoke earlier. This is only for menu-driven combat. Okay, so if your combat, your battle is one of these, okay? This will not affect whether it appears or not in that widget skill slot down the side, okay? This is for menu-driven combat for this option here on the text menu. If you don't have this, where is it? If you don't have this ticked, if we were to untick that after our calcify skill, if we were to untick that, then if we were in a menu-driven battle, this option would not be available to us, okay? However, if we did tick that, then this option would now be available because the skill is usable in menu combat. I should probably say, because that's what it really applies to, usable in menu combat, okay? Now, another thing that's important to note about menu combat, because I was taking a look at it yesterday, some scripts will not work with menu combat because of the way that menus work. Because you've got a sort of text menu up on the screen with options for, these 4 things, or custom things, whatever you want. Because you've got those menus up, there are certain things you can't do. One of those being request entity, because when you've got a menu-driven combat that's up on the screen, it overrides your ability to click on the actual entities themselves, because you have to use the menu options to do the battle rather than clicking with your mouse and moving around and things like that. So besides which, a skill like this would be useless on menu-driven combat anyway, because nothing moves in menu-driven combat. So it's all done by the text options and what they do. But you could still make a skill that, passively does things, i.e. it damages enemies or it heals enemies or spawns something. You could probably still do those, but you just wouldn't be able to, click something to do it. So just be mindful that these sort of things don't work with menu combat. So that brings us to the end of the skill video, because there's not really much more to cover with skills. Now, we haven't gone over status effects. And the reason I'm not going to cover status effects in this video is because they're a topic in and of themselves. We will revisit the skills option and the status effects as it relates to status effects when we cover this section, which I'll probably do in the next video. But for now, that'll wrap up this video on skills. I hope it's been helpful to at least explain how skills work, how you can script them, and how to use them in all the different ways. I just wanted to give you an introduction into skills, showing you what all the options are, how to set them up, and give you a little introduction into how you can then write your own scripts for skills, giving you an example of a skill in this case that turns an enemy into stone and stops its ability to move, which I thought would be a cool custom skill to demonstrate. So with that said, that'll wrap up this video. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next one.